Thank you so much. And now it is time for my little sermon, but I don't know how it's going to go after Reverend Alice's because that was so good. Also, hi to my mother. Hello, mommy. So, what'd you say? Yeah, Grammy's here. Okay, but now you have to be quiet. Okay, so back to our circle lessons. Thank you so much to Reverend Alice talking about how strong those circles are and how big that circle is when we talk about inclusion and pluralism. Now, when we had our UU lesson earlier, we learned a brief history of the two circles behind the chalice. This one. And we also learned that, well, if you weren't here, a little refresher. They represent Unitarianism and Universalism when they came together in 1961. And Unitarians in the United States were committed to helping out Jewish people who were seeking safety in the wake of World War II. I talked about the Unitarian Service Committee, which is the USC, being formed in an amusing tale that they wanted to come up with a logo to make themselves seem more official, since they were basically offering very secretive help for refugees. Now, what I find very amusing is that there are two very different accounts of all of this on the stories that are searchable on the UUA's website. And I'm going to read them to you. I'm just going to read you an excerpt of one of them, but I'm going to read you the first one. The first one is called Circles of Light, the Flaming Chalice. And this is adopted from a children's education curriculum that was named this. And this is by Janine Grossmeyer. It says, some Unitarians in the United States decided to help the refugees and formed the Unitarian Service Committee. Committee members went to Europe to try to bring refugees safely out of the war. But the refugees came from many different countries, like us. They spoke many different languages like German and Yiddish or French or Italian or Polish or Hungarian. Most of the refugees did not speak English. Most of the Unitarian committee members spoke only English. How could the Unitarians explain they were there to help? It was difficult for the refugees to understand them. And I would say that's very common that most in the United States learn English and don't learn any other languages unless they were taught them at home. And so Dr. Charles Joy was in charge of the committee. He knew that the Unitarians needed a symbol everyone could recognize, no matter what language they spoke. It would have to be a picture, a symbol with no words. That way, anyone could understand the message. We are here to help you. Dr. Joy asked an artist named Hans Deutsch for help. Maybe an artist could draw the right kind of picture that could be a symbol for the Unitarians. The two men met in Portugal. Mr. Deutsch understood why a picture would be more helpful. He had come from Austria, but now he was a refugee because of the war. In Portugal, people speak Portuguese. Mr. Deutsch was used to speaking German. Mr. Deutsch made a drawing of a chalice with a flame, that part that we see in the middle. Surrounded by a circle. So they used to just have the one circle. He showed it to Dr. Joy. The symbol really worked. Soon, refugees all over Europe began to see this symbol wherever the Unitarian Service Committee went to find and help them. When refugees saw the picture of a chalice, a flame, and a circle around the chalice that looked like it was protecting it, they knew they could trust the committee members. So they felt like this circle with just the one was protecting the flame. They knew they could trust those service members. They did not need to speak English or even know how to read to understand the symbol. The picture gave the message of hope, freedom, and love that the refugees were looking for. After the war was over, Unitarians began using the flaming chalice and its circle as a symbol in worship. Later, the Universalists joined the Unitarians to form the Unitarian Universalist Association, UUA, and people started to draw the symbol with two circles instead of just one. One circle is for the Unitarians and the other is for the Universalists. The circles are so close together that they overlap. The circles are connected, just as Unitarian Universalists believe that all of us are connected to one another, which is something that Reverend Alice talked about. The chalice is not exactly in the middle of the circle. So usually the chalice is off to the side of the circle. I don't have anything to show you all that. I'll look for something around here that usually the chalice is off to the side. It's almost like the chalice has moved over to let something else into the circle. This reminds us that as Unitarian Universalists, we always leave room for other ideas in other ways. There is always room for more in Unitarian Universalism. We as Unitarian Universalists have all kinds of chalices. We light a chalice on Sunday morning in worship and at other times when we gather in our faith home together. Some family homes use chalices during meals or special occasions. You all there in Africa have the most amazing chalices there. Chalices come in lots of different shapes, sizes, colors, just like Unitarian Universalists. The flaming chalice is a faith symbol of Unitarian Universalists. It is a symbol of learning, caring, and love. It is a symbol of hope, freedom, and light. It is our faith home symbol. And now I'm going to read you a part of the very next story on the UUA's website. I promise I'm not making this up. This is a pamphlet by Susan J. Ritchie that's called The Flaming Chalice. I'm going to skip a bunch of the beginning, which repeats the same thing. And this is the part at the end. It says, many people are surprised to learn that a chalice as a part of worship only found its way to Unitarian Universalist congregations in the early 1980s. But the path it took to reach the sanctuary is a very Unitarian Universalist one. A story that begins with World War II. We're not going to talk about the details of that. Originally, the flaming chalice was a two-dimensional image stamped on documents created by the Unitarian Service Committee. Remember that, right? To help Jewish refugees escape, persecution on the eve of World War II. The design had been hastily put together by the artist Hans Deutsch, himself a refugee. Huh? What happened to the story about going to Portugal and they're designing everything and they're up? What happened to the last story? This is the next story on the UUA's website, okay? So it was hastily, which means fast, thrown together by the artist Hans Deutsch, himself a refugee. Deutsch was working at the direction of the USC's, which is the Unitarian Service Committee, director, Reverend Charles Joy, who believed that such a logo would make their paperwork look more official. What? So he just wanted their paperwork to look good? What happened to the last story? Reverend Joy would later claim that the design was reminiscent of the lamps of holy oil used by the ancient Greeks and Romans on their altars, and that the flame itself represented a spirit of helpfulness and sacrifice. There has always been a lack of clarity regarding Joyce's original intentions, which were quite possibly not highly developed. What happened to the last story? Eventually, the chalice design formed the basis for the American Unitarian Association's official logo. After Unitarian Universalism merged in 1961, the symbols acquired two overlapping circles to represent each of the two traditions. Many renditions of the chalice and the time of the merger display the chalice off-centered, a design copied from one of the popular among many Universalists in the 1950s, so we have a little more information about that. The symbol featured a large open circle with a very small off-centered cross inside of it. This signified how Universalism had grown out of Christian tradition, but still held open to a world of possibilities and even unanswered questions. Now that does sound more similar to the last story. Interestingly, we aren't sure how the chalice as a two-dimensional artistic rendering, meaning it was flat, turned into a three-dimensional object used in worship. All evidence, though, suggests that the path leads through our children's religious education programs. Curricula used in the late 70s stressed the meaning of the chalice and encouraged the children to make chalices in different media, so different little things that they make chalices with. Eventually, those chalices morphed into objects that could be lit. The first document uses of a chalice in the main sanctuary are from Sundays on which the children and youth led worship and demonstrated their practice to the adult congregation. How wonderful that a children's church craft captured the imagination of an entire denomination. I enjoy the chalice's lack of predetermined meaning. One way to understand Unitarian Universalist distinctive character is to see it as orthopraxy. Orthopraxy stresses that the most important religious bonds are formed outside of justice actions and loving practice. with contrast to orthodoxy, more common in Christian traditions, which stresses correct and often homogeneous beliefs as the most important aspect of religion. So, orthopraxy, meaning something that we practice together and believe together, versus orthodoxy, meaning something that we have to all believe the same thing, is what the writer is saying. The chalice was a symbol invented to represent courageous deeds that were already taking place, which was developed by children in the cradle of love. And I just want to repeat this sentence again after we just read that wonderful first story about how inspiring the chalice was. I want to read this sentence again. There has always been a lack of clarity regarding Deutsch's original intentions. We're talking really about that opportunity today. The lack of clarity gives us an opportunity. Drawing circles wide around different faiths, our different friends and neighbors, different justice issues is an opportunity for new things to emerge. But that's very, very, very hard. We want everything. We want to be able to do everything and hold everything. I have some circles here, but as our circles move, things move out of the boundaries. So if I have something that's here and I'm focused on a justice issue and I say, I'm going to put my circle around here, as my circle moves, things move out of the boundary of the circle of what we can focus on and what we can put our energy into. Now, if the circle gets too big too fast, obviously it'll stretch or bend or even break. It has to be a steady growth of capacity and commitment for it to be sustainable. Conviction is not enough for us to be worried about everything. We have to have capacity and commitment grow in a steady, nice and slow way for things to be sustainable. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story and then we're going to go because we're all getting tired. Many years ago, I was at a church and I was listening to a preacher and he was telling a story about sin. Now, this concept of sin that, separates us from people, separates us from our higher power, separates us from the things that are right and wrong in our lives, as we understand it sometimes in Unitarian Universalism. And he was talking about how elephants never forget anything, okay? Elephants remember things their whole life. And actually, elephants, when you go to a circus, they have a chain around their ankle. And there's a little teeny circle around the elephant's foot, and there's a chain. And technically, that elephant could move its foot and break that chain at any time because it's so big and strong. But they take the little circle and put it around the elephant's little foot. Then they take a bigger circle as the elephant gets bigger and put a little chain around that little foot until that elephant gets to be tons, heavy tons. And they put a big chain that it really could break out of, but it doesn't know because elephants never forget. So that elephant in its mind is not more powerful than that chain. And this preacher was talking about sin and in our context as Unitarian Universalists, just talking about the ability to have our minds and our hearts focused on issues. Sometimes we feel hopeless with everything that's going on. Kenya deals with things that are so similar to what the U.S. is dealing with. And the preacher said, I'll never forget this. This happened 10 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. He said that it's just like that elephant. If you think that you can't break out, have you tried lately? Have you tried lately? So all of our commitments, all of the things that we want to feel and that we can focus on, have we tried to think about how our capacity and our commitment have to grow sustainably in order to stay committed? Have we tried lately? Do you know your power? Do you know your power? How strong is your power when you can do this and have many circles overlapped? How strong would your power be if you can take all these circles, all your friends that care about different things, all of the issues that you have, in your heart to focus on. If you took those and then moved them until all of your little circles overlap, how strong could you really, really be for the things that you want to focus on? You could really find your power. We can do so much through this. This represents the beloved community that Dr. Martin Luther King talked about. Why not bring our various faiths and practices and our prayers and our justice movements together to see what they can hold? How many circles can we draw? Ashe, amen. And may it be so.